you up in the middle of the night, just to hear them say, welcome to the Hotel California. Such a lovely place, oh, such a lovely place. We living it up at the Hotel California. Any time of year, yeah, you can find it here. Mirrors on the ceiling, dipping champagne on ice. Then she said, we are all just prisoners here of our own device. And in the master's chambers, they gathered for the feast. They stab it with their stealing knives, but they just can't kill the beast. The last thing I remember, I was running for the door. I had to find a passage back to the place I was before. Relax, said the night man, we are about to receive. You can check out any time you like, but you can't ever leave. Thank you all for listening to us play. We appreciate you. Thank you so much. My name is Delia, and this is my younger sister over here. Her name's Adrienne. We have a band. Our name is DNA, and we are happy that you enjoyed listening to us. So thank you once again. We will end with one more song to play, Master Blaster. We hope you guys enjoy. Ready? It's hotter than July. Though the world's full of problems, they couldn't touch us even if they tried. All these hoes on the books. Tonight there will be a party on the corner at the end of the block. Didn't know you would be jamming until the break of dawn. But nobody ever told you that you would be jamming until the break of dawn. Yeah, we're jamming, jam on. To join the fighting, but our answer today is to let all our worries, like the breeze through our fingers, slip away. Peace has come to Zimbabwe. Third world rise. Time for celebration, 'cause we've only just begun. Didn't know you would be jamming until the break of dawn. But nobody ever told you that you would be jamming until the break of dawn. Yeah, we're jamming, jam on. You ask me, am I happy? Well, as a matter of fact, I can say that I'm ecstatic, 'cause we've all just made a pact. We've agreed to get together, join as children in Jack. When you're moving in the positive, your destination is the brightest star. Didn't know you jamming until the break of dawn. But nobody ever told you that you would be jamming until the break of dawn. Yeah, we're jamming, jam on. Yeah, didn't know you would be jamming until the break of dawn. But nobody ever told you that you would be jamming until the break of dawn. I bet nobody ever told you that you would be jamming until the break of dawn. I said nobody ever told you that you would be jamming until the break of dawn. Yeah, we're jamming, jam on. Until the break of dawn. But nobody ever told you that you jamming until the break of dawn. I see nobody ever told you that you will be jamming until the break of dawn. Yeah, nobody ever told you that you will be jamming until the break of dawn. Yeah, we're jamming, jam on. Thank you so much. Thank you. Rob Taylor.
Very low for the principal organiser.
That's all over the place. Are you standing by your leader's idea of kicking people out of Christian churches?
No.
That's what your leader was saying. That's what Chris Bishop was saying. That's what Chris Lapson is saying. Christopher Lapson. He did say that on the TV. Shall I bring out the... Huh? He said that on the... That's your policy, your housing policy. Your very housing policy. Kick the people out of state houses. No. And today I do some polling for the Labour Party. Because I've been a Labour Party since I arrived in this country in 1978. And a lot of people turning me down. And voting for you. So today I'm turning you down. March away. Go. Go.
All right.
Go. I don't hear them. Slack people. Just lying like this. Leader. April. You're just telling lies like Christopher Lipsky. This leader is telling lies. So he's spreading more lies. You can't come here and beg people to vote for him. That's individuals properly. So I'm telling you, teach yourself. Don't talk to me. That was his policy, keeping Pacific Islanders out of their own houses. And he's very lying, he's not keeping people out.
Have a guest, you don't get dressed up.
How can you lie to me that it's not their body's policy?
We don't close it till 5.
3. Yeah, Papakura Youth, Catholic, we're going to start our program tonight. You ready? Hey, hey! Hey, hey! Tangi boleh tekak! Tangi boleh buffalo!
Hey, hey! Before I introduce the chair for tonight, just a few housekeeping. On that far end there's a bathroom, the restroom, so most welcome to use it. It's free of charge, and there's, in case of any fire or false alarm, our assembly area is out on the grass in front lawn there. Kia ora, tarofa lava, malo lelei, pula vinaka, and warm Pacific greetings to you all. Te manatu o paia o Sam whaingta pale atunu o lea leo e spam talanga. Ale wauna, ainu nu watu, whatino tau salau tau paia na le popopo ni pāfo e le solo. Tulo na lava. On behalf of our parish priest, Father Peter McAfee, who is also present here tonight, I'd like to welcome you all to St. Anne's Catholic parish here. When we come together here, we all as one. So it doesn't matter if you're Catholic or not, we are all God's children. So welcome to tonight. Pat Sneeden is a handsome parangi fellow who has contributed most of his life in serving the community. Many projects and also involved in the government projects in the past, but also in the health profession. He's an entrepreneur, a wonderful guy, and he is going to chair our forum tonight. So welcome, Pat.
Ne mana na reo na waka tēnā koutou katoa, e te whare tūne tēnā koe. E nā mate o tēnei rohi, haere, nā mana whenua o tēnei rohi. Kia ora mai tātou katoa. Man, it's a privilege to be in your company tonight. What a lovely thing we do in Aotearoa, eh? Where we have the opportunity to gather like this and gather under the kind of auspices and the mana of this whare, to be able to debate hard what we think are the important issues about our country. This opportunity, 3 years each time, to really lay out the landscape of what we think we should be doing, and to critique and to support those who we feel are either not doing the right thing or are doing the right thing. So, if you think about the tikanga of tonight, think about it as being New Zealand at our best selves. Highly intelligent, hugely animated by the issues that actually concern us, willing to shout out loud if we need to hear about what we think, but deeply respectful of those people who put themselves in the space to actually be the people that activate our wishes. And, you know, if you watch overseas often enough, you see the lack of mana in so many of those proceedings. Well, we are not a situation where mana is lacking. We are a situation where mana is at the forefront. So the way we behave and the way that we answer and listen to the questions and the way that we dig into things that we find important is really something to treasure in Aotearoa. And so let's be the best of that tonight in what we do. Now we're going to set it up a bit, because we've got this wonderful Samoan CEO of Caritas New Zealand, Mina Antonia, who is a fabulous woman, who is wanting to talk to us a bit about how she sees the world through the eyes of Caritas as being the CEO of that organisation. And then she'll be followed by this old white guy with the white hair called Alan Johnson, who's been around the social justice delivery in South Auckland for so long, and is a man of great stature and importance, who brings a humility to his social justice activism. We'll hear the two of them tonight, and then we will go on to the candidates, who will each have a structured opportunity to talk to us for 6 minutes. And Sanelli tells me he's got a timekeeper. I'm not sure who it is, but it'll be him. And for 6 minutes, and then we're going to have questions from the floor. And we want it to be lively. We want you to be engaged. Be unafraid to ask hard questions of the candidates. These are important times that we are living in. And, you know, we've just come out of the back end of a virus, and people are interested in what's ahead of us. So let's be great at interrogating that interest. All right, so Mena, if you'd like to join us, that would be great. Oh, I beg your pardon. Before we start the action, let's start the karakia. And could I have the parish priest to deliver the message? Nice to see you.
Welcome. Lovely to have you here. Peter McAfee. E te whānau hui nei, tēnā koutou, nau mai, haere mai. It's a great pleasure to have you here at St. Anne's, and I'm delighted to put that welcome out to you. Many of you long here already, but it's also great to have the Manuhiri Tuarangi with us as well. Let's begin with a prayer, talking of the mana of this gathering. Place ourselves in God's presence for just a moment of silence. Lord, Holy Spirit, let your presence rest upon us this evening. Fill us with your understanding and love for one another, our brothers and sisters, your beloved children. We ask particularly the gift of wisdom upon the speakers this evening. Help us all to love what is right and to desire to do what is good. Mary, dear Mother, be with us this evening, you who sang the praises of God, who lifts up the lowly and fills the hungry with good things. My brothers and sisters, I ask you to join me in this little antiphon to Our Lady, and with it I will return to the seats. Ave, Ave, Ave Maria. Ave, Ave, Ave Maria. Ki te ingo te matua, te mai tua te wairuta. Take that back if you need it.
Thank you. Okay, Mena Antonio is the CEO of Caritas. We are great mates. We were on a board together and mental health board together, and she is a person of substance and great skill. So I'm turning this over to you for the next 15 minutes, Mena. Oh, okay. Down that end. Okay.
Thank you. Kia ora, Pat. Thank you very much for that introduction. E ngā mana, e ngā reo, e ngā iwi. Tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa, e te mana whenua, ka nui te mihi, e aku, rangatira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou. Tēnā tātou katoa. Ko Filomena ato Neil ahau. Ko ahau Aotearoa. Ia whaatalo whatele atu, ia au a Whionga Bishop Steve, Father Peter, Deacon Sarnelli. Ia mamoli atu foi, le whaamanuia, ia auto ofisa o Palemea, o New Sila. To you all, especially our youth.
Good evening. In commemoration of Māori Language Week, kia kaha te reo Māori, kia ora, mālorere tāwofa. I speak to you as Chief Executive of Caritas Aotearoa, New Zealand, together with my Education Officer, Justine Delport, who's based here.
And now hiding behind the table. We are thrilled to stand and present to you the work of Caritas, which is an agency of the New Zealand Catholic Bishops' Conference. Caritas is the second largest humanitarian network in the world. We are also a member of Caritas International, and there are over 160 agencies throughout the world. Our international development work is spread mostly across Oceania and Southeast Asia, including Fiji, Papua New Guinea, Tonga, Cambodia, and many other countries. Soon, you will see some examples of our humanitarian disaster and relief work in the video that we have prepared for you. In country, we also have an extensive presence via our parish and school resources, especially around the Bishop's Lenten Appeal at Easter, and also Social Justice Week, which has just finished, and usually precedes the Te Wiki o Te Reo Māori. We also have an active tangata whenua program working with Māori Indigenous communities around the country, including an active and current water testing project in North Hokianga. Our social justice and advocacy work is alive and dynamic. We are active and outspoken on environmental justice, with a special focus on the Pacific Ocean, Le Moana, with our Caritas Oceania partners, of which there are 7 countries involved. Other areas of advocacy work is our human trafficking, modern slavery, refugee and migrants, housing, the
relief of suffering of the poor and the vulnerable. But rather than tell you about our work, the wisdom is to show you. We live in an amazing world that has a population nearing 8 billion people. Sadly, a huge proportion of these people face tough challenges. These challenges include large-scale emergencies, and for many, it may just be the struggles of everyday life. For some people, it can be a combination of both. Over the last year or so, there have been a number of terrible natural disasters as well as emergencies caused by human choices and actions. Both these types of events have turned innocent lives upside down. Earlier this year, a 7.8 magnitude earthquake was felt in both Turkey and Syria and caused widespread damage and heartbreaking loss of thousands of lives. In Tonga, a powerful eruption of an underwater volcano sent ash almost 20 kilometres into the air and across Tonga's islands, and also caused a tsunami which resulted in widespread damage and disruption to communities across the country. In Pakistan, during the second half of last year, larger than normal rainfall caused massive flooding throughout the country and left villages and crops below water. Unfortunately, many lives were lost. This happened so quickly and people were not prepared. The United Nations estimate that as of 2023, a quarter of the global population live in conflict-affected lives, in conflict-affected areas. This is 2 billion people. Alarmingly, war and conflict have led to more than 100 million people being displaced from their homes, which is more than 20 times our country's population. It is now more than a year since Russia invaded Ukraine, and the impact has been devastating. Cities and villages have been bombed until now, and they have become like ghost towns. Loss and fear have been felt by all. More than 8 million Ukrainians, mostly women and children, have been forced to leave the country as refugees. Close to the same number have been left internally displaced within the country in search of a safe place to live. Millions have been without power and water for months. In Syria, a complex war has been going on between multiple groups since 2011. More than 500,000 lives have been lost during the time. And after such a long conflict, the country has been torn apart in so many ways now, that 75% of the population cannot access basic needs such as food, water and shelter. In other places, including Yemen, Afghanistan, Haiti and Ethiopia, conflict countries between different warring groups and between those who have taken control of the country and the population they are supposed to protect. Many of these conflicts have lasted for years and caused real damage, not only to lives lost between those who are fighting, but also to neighbouring areas and to the whole nation's well-being. When funds are spent for military purposes, it means there is less for essential services like health and education. Other protracted emergencies continue throughout the world. In Kenya, Somalia, South Sudan, and other countries around the Horn of Africa, long periods without rainfall and poor management of land and natural resources have led to droughts and famine, with millions of families now struggling with the real possibility of starvation, as there is not enough food. In Bangladesh, more than 1 million Rohingya people forcibly displaced from Myanmar live in a large camp near a small area called Cox's Bazar, where they try to rebuild their homes and lives while living in crowded and often dangerous camp conditions. Caritas works with lots of communities around the world, and in many cases the struggles are the same. Sometimes it can be hard for families to find a reliable source of income
to provide for all family members. This is absolutely impacted by access to quality education and limited job opportunities. And as we've already seen, food insecurity is a challenge worldwide, which is a big concern given the importance of food as one of our most basic needs. And connected closely to this is the impact of climate change, and especially on subsistence farmers who make up 25% of the world population. Changing weather patterns, including rising temperatures and reduced rainfall, are making sustainable quality food production very difficult. In a developed country like New Zealand, we sometimes forget about the helpful health services that we can utilise, like doctors and hospitals. However, in other less developed places, there's often limited health support. And as relevant here today, unjust leadership can also cause massive shockwaves through a nation leaving the most vulnerable alone and unsupported, whilst the privileged benefit. This is a sad reality throughout many less developed countries. As the second biggest is the second largest humanitarian network on the planet. Caritas exists to be love in action and to walk alongside communities experiencing some of those varied challenges. Here are some recent highlights. In Turkey and Syria, Caritas staff have been working tirelessly to help those find survivors, distribute food, water, mattresses, and other basic needs. In Poland and other countries neighbouring Ukraine, Caritas staff and volunteers have been tirelessly supporting the millions of refugees arriving in need of shelter, food, and future direction. In Pakistan, Caritas provided support for those who had lost their homes, especially temporary housing supplies like tarpaulins and tents. In Bangladesh, Caritas works alongside those living in Cox's Bazar and helps to provide basic needs like shelter, food, water, sanitation, and hygiene. In Timor-Leste, Caritas supports Timorese women to develop their skills through the opportunity of running small businesses to secure income to provide a good future for their families. In Cambodia, Caritas supports Indigenous farmers to improve their farming techniques, adapt their crops to a changing climate, and protect their forests against illegal farming and logging. And in Fiji, Caritas supports young people to become self-employed farmers through non-formal training at the Tutu Rural Training Centre, which is run by the Marist Fathers. Now, we don't know what life will bring in the months and years ahead, but we do know for sure that Caritas will be there continuing to bring hope, life, and love where it is needed most. We thank you, and we also wish especially our candidates all the best in the upcoming election. We ask you to remember the work of Caritas in its foreign policy. We are funded through New Zealand Aid and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade, and mostly our kind and supportive donors throughout New Zealand. We are little, but we have a reach of millions through our churches, our parishes, schools, throughout the world. Like St. Teresa of Lisieux would say, our approach is to do little ways with great love. We are charity workers. We are followers of Christ. And we thank you for hearing about the story that we have of Caritas and its work around the world. Kia ora.
Mena, that's a superb way of telling your story. Beautifully done and very easy to pick up and ingest. Thank you very much. Well done. I'm going to invite now Alan Johnson to come and talk to us. Alan's going to take 10 minutes to tell us a bit about his journey and what he thinks is New Zealand faces at the moment. Alan's been a worker in social justice now for decades and a really prominent inventor of the Salvation Army's annual report card on the country. So he's a person who knows about stuff. Alan, over to you.
Kia ora. Nā mihi nui, kia mātou mātu i te rangi, kia mātou whaia papatua nuku i tā koutu nei. E whakawhitai mātou kia korua mō tō korua koha maha. He me hoki ki te whare i tūnei, te whare o Hato Ani, te whare o tāku o tapu o tātou whānau. Me nui kia koutou mō tēnei pō. Kia ora everybody, and thank you, Pat, for that introduction. I'm honoured to be here because, to be honest, my alignments to many important organisations are now sort of dwindling. Although I remain a parishioner here at St Anne's, the parish of my parents and my siblings and my children and my grandchildren. So thank you all for coming along, and for fellow parishioners, thank you for your presence and hospitality. I guess elections for me are about choices, if you're like me, you're very tribal in the choices you make about elections. Much of the decisions we made have already been made. We are locked into a particular relationship with a political party, most likely based on our family culture. Perhaps we go back 2 or 3 generations of supporting a particular political party. And I think sometimes we need to fundamentally reconsider that. Not necessarily to change, but to think about why you'd continue doing those things. And perhaps we should do this reconfirmation. We should ask ourselves about the party that we support. Are they the party I think they are? Are they representing the values that I hold closely? Are they likely to represent the interests of my children and my grandchildren? And so I just ask you, and clearly I'm not here to tell you who to vote for. I hope many of the candidates here today will convince you to vote for them. But please think about those questions. And I'm just reading a book at the moment on logic, and in it the author says that one of the reasons we have arguments over politics is because we start in a different position. And in particular, if you think about the question of welfare, which is dear to my heart, is it better to have a welfare system where everybody who deserves or needs something gets it, even if it means that people who don't need it get something as well? That's the thing called a false positive. 2 things that go right, one of which possibly shouldn't. Or is it better to have a welfare system where people aren't able to cheat it, even if it means that those who need something sometimes miss out because of bureaucracy or some sort of barrier? That's this idea of a false negative. And sometimes where we start decides how we proceed in an argument, and we can never resolve those arguments if you come across them within your whānau or within your neighbourhood. And I'd just like to ask you to think about where you might start and the values you might bring to your decision on who to vote for. In particular, I'd like to talk about a thing that I've read about over the years and delved into from time to time, a thing that many of you may know about called Catholic social teaching. Pope Leo the 13th in 1891 started Catholic social teaching with a thing called Rerum Novarum. And at that time, the church was somewhat worried about the rising popularity of socialism and Marxism amongst the working class. And it was at a time of rabid capitalism where the differences between the rich and the poor were extreme. And many members of the church were drifting towards communism and socialism as an answer. And Pope Leo came up with this set of ideas around what it meant for Catholics to think about politics and society. And in particular, he raised the idea that families were important to the structure of society and that they had to be respected and supported. He spoke of the dignity of work and of workers, but he also spoke of the importance of private property. So it's a bit of both. And over the years since Pope Leo, other popes have come up with statements, things that they call encyclicals, about various social positions or social teachings of the Catholic Church. The most recent is one by Pope Francis called Laudato Si, which is Praise Be. And here he starts to talk about the rabid consumerism that is gripping this planet, about the damage that we're doing to the environment and in particular climate change. But social Catholic teaching at its core, and I'd suggest that you do look at it closely because it's a very rich form of doctrine and thinking, is based on 4 key ideas or principles. The first is that of human dignity, that every person is made in the image of God and has dignity, and this really is the basis of human rights. That people aren't here to be used as things, they are people in themselves and they are deserving of our respect. The second one is that of the common good, that we are obliged to serve the common good and that we are obliged to work for social conditions which allow every person to flourish and to thrive. The third principle is that of solidarity, that human beings are social in their nature, that we reflect the Trinitarian God in the basis of our social character. We need each other, and we can only grow and flourish and achieve our potential in our relationships with one another, that our salvation is tied up with the salvation of others, and that we are responsible for one another. And the fourth principle is that of subsidiarity, that decision-making should rest at the lowest possible level in society, that those who are most affected by decisions should have some say in those decisions, that the purpose of higher organisation parts of the society, such as governments, is to support those lower levels, not to suppress them or not to assume that they work for them. And for me, particularly the question of subsidiarity is a really important one as I think about the way I view politics and my activism and the way I live. And two examples of how that might apply. One of the key ideas that come out of Catholic social teaching is what they call the preferential option for the poor. And I believe the basic inspiration for this comes from the life of Jesus himself. He chose to be poor, he chose mostly to be amongst the poor. And his example is one we all understand and should follow, that the poor, I always struggle with that line, the poor are always with us, but you will not have me. But the reality is that the poor were at the centre of Jesus' life, and they should be at the centre of ours. Pope Benedict the 16th said, the option for the poor is not an ideological one, it is straight from the Gospels. He said that implicit in the Christian faith is a God who became poor for us so that we could be enriched by his poverty. I really like that idea, being enriched by his poverty. So I'd suggest to you that one of the things that we need to think about today is the questions of inequality and whether or not the policies that people are talking about today address inequality. And I'd like to say too that the candidates today, I have much admiration for, because I've been a candidate myself. Most people are courageous because they stand up, they stand out. Most of them have got no chance of winning. They know that, but they won't admit it. But the reality is they still do it. And for me, they approach that with a degree of goodwill. I've never met a candidate or even someone elected to office who doesn't have the goodness of their fellow New Zealanders and New Zealand at heart. And they do so not out of a sense of self-interest or malice, but out of a sense of service. Finally, I'd like to leave you with just a scripture. And it's from 1 Kings chapter 1, and it talks about the wisdom of Solomon. And in that, and I won't read it out because I'm running out of time, but in that, Yahweh appears to Solomon in a dream, and he asks Solomon, what is it that you want? And Solomon said, can you give me the wisdom to understand the good from evil and the right from wrong? Because I am just a servant. And Yahweh said to him, you will have that in abundance, and you'll also have these other riches. But what I think we need to do today is to pray and to hope that the candidates that are here tonight, and the candidates that are elected have that servant heart. Because if I think they do, I think we are well served and we have a sort of a bright future as the people of Aotearoa. Thank you very much.
That's a beautiful eulogy there. I think it is right and proper too to thank the people who are standing. Man, it takes a lot in your whānau, in your ainga, to actually put yourself forward for these kinds of positions and the public scrutiny that you have. So I think let's give a general round of applause for those who actually are doing this. So Agnes, we've got you as first tonight. It's lovely to have you here. Agnes Lohini is in the National Party, and I'm going to give you the opportunity to have the floor for 6 minutes. You can either use that mic or this mic. Yep, okay.
Tēnā koutou katoa, tālofa lava, mālore se fōmau malangi mā. Wonderful to be here. Thank you very much for the invitation. My name is Agnes Lohini, and I am a candidate for the National Party. And I just want to really acknowledge the speakers before me for sharing what they have done. Ellen, thank you for those words. Very, very inspiring. And the first thing that came to me is actually, we sit here and we've got colours of, red, blue, green, pink, whatever colours they are. But as we've laid before us tonight, as Christians or as Catholics in this community, we all know that we are children of God. And so I'll start on that path. So to understand a little bit about why I'm in politics is to understand a little bit about my upbringing. I'm very proud to be the daughter of two wonderful Samoan immigrant parents that came here in the 60s, like many people here, or your parents and grandparents. My mother is from Amaile and Safotu and Asau. Her name is Talaleo Malia Mena Matautia. My father, Fipuliai Pelasio Lohini, hails from Siumu and Safune. And it is really their journey, their sacrifice, their shoulders that I stand on. My upbringing, up to about 10, I grew up in a 3-bedroom state house with 15 of my family members in a state housing area in Mount Albert. A very normal story for our families in those days. And it was a house full of love. Not much money, but was a house full of love, the strength of family, the strength of faith. And a priority from our family was education for my siblings and I and our cousins. And it is really the values in that home that have underpinned my journey in life. Those values around hard work, taking responsibility for yourself and for your family, and just being dedicated to our faith. So my parents got married, well actually they met at St. Joseph's Greyland Parish Social. They were quite good apparently in those days, and that's where they got married, that's where I was baptised, and it's the parish that my parents and my family and my siblings still attend today. I went to Marist Primary, Marist Sisters College, then went on to University of Auckland and I gained a degree in chemical engineering. For the last 20 plus years, have built a business with my mother and my sisters. The business is called Mena. There's a clothing Pacific brand we started in our family home in Samoa. I am a business mentor as well, and very proud to be a mother of 5 children with my husband Ward Kamal, who hails from Christchurch. He is Ngāti Motunga and Ngaitahu. And the journey into politics was one that took me by surprise, but actually when I think about that journey and those values and the sacrifice that my parents did for my sisters and I wanted ultimately to make sure that I could be part of solutions for this country, for our families, for our communities, and for my children and grandchildren. And so I want to thank you all for being here. I think it's wonderful, and it's really important that our communities do take action and take note and be interested in politics. I don't actually care which party, but what's really, really important is that you don't just come to meetings like this. You actually get involved in the political parties. The parties only get better when you come into the parties and contribute to the discussions, and you bring your stories and you bring your realities, and you can actually be part of the policies of that party. And ultimately, that can only be a good thing for our democracy, a good thing for our country, a good thing for our families. And so I thank you so much for the opportunity to share. And I also want to acknowledge my fellow candidates across the spectrum for stepping forward. It isn't easy. It isn't easy. And I do particularly want to acknowledge my fellow national candidates. Shiva Kilari, could you please stand up? Manirewa Navchesh, Rosemary Burke, and Rima Narkley. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much, and right on time. Can I invite now Jenny Salisa from Labour to address us? Jenny.
Kia ora koutou katoa, happy te reo Māori Language Week. Tolo, tolo, tolo. Tuku mua ke hōwhanga he ngahi tāla whakatā pūga tā mō koe whanga Māori e koe ni ke whai atu, haki lea no no I he whiawhi koe ni. I must have actually missed the memo, Pat. I'm a stand-in, you see. The person who was initially invited is our Deputy Prime Minister, the Honourable Carmel Sepuloni, and I did not know that we had this 5-6 minutes to give a speech, and so it'll be a speech from the heart. And I'll tell my journey similar to my friend Agnes before me. It's a similar story. The reason why I'm here in Aotearoa, New Zealand is because my family moved from Tonga to Aotearoa, New Zealand, because this is the land of milk and honey. I'm here with my mum, 82 years old, Loketi Lātou, and her older sister, Vera McMullen, who's 84 years old. But this is also the reason why I'm back in Aotearoa, New Zealand. It's because of my parents. My dad is still alive. He's 91, he'll be 92 in November of this year. And in my house, it's like a mini rest home some days with my 3 senior folks that live with me and my Samoan husband, very good man, to be so loving of the big family. So the whole family moved over here. My dad was the only pharmacist in the Kingdom of Tonga for 36 years. And he had this dream for me. I'm his only daughter by birth, 3 brothers, and we adopted several other children. But his dream for me was to be a doctor. Unfortunately, his dream was not realised. Even though I did all, as an obedient daughter would, I did all of the maths papers, the science papers, and I was going as if I could actually get into medical school. But when we came to New Zealand, I had studied right up until 6th form in Tonga, and at that time, Tonga only went up to 6th form, didn't actually go any further. And so if you wanted to further your education, which my family did, the whole family moved over here so that I could actually have that opportunity to further my studies. Unfortunately though, it was a very backward story. The family moved here, I entered a school that will remain unnamed. I only lasted about 3 months. One of the reasons was because my English was so bad, still is pretty fresh, I just didn't fit in. I felt like the kind of schooling system that I was used to back home was not the same here, and I just didn't fit in. So I dropped out. But I had already gotten good grades in Tonga. My father saw to it. So I had really good grades, and so I dropped out, went and worked, started working in a kitchen as a kitchen hand in a hotel in town, Hotel de Bretts, I believe it's still there. That only lasted about 3 months. It really motivated me to actually go back to doing some other work or to do some studies, and so I chose the other work. I went and worked in a bank for about 4 years, Westpac Bank. But always at the back of my mind, my father's and my mother's voice was there saying, Jenny, we came to New Zealand so that you could further your studies, and which I wasn't doing. And so I went to the University of Auckland, got their little calendar, flicked through it. I didn't grow up or was wanting to be a lawyer or anything, but I flicked through the whole thing and I thought, I want to study for a degree where I would end up being a professional of some kind. And law was what I ended up deciding to do. So I studied law and arts education at the University of Auckland, the #1 university in the country. although my husband tells me that there is another university that's actually better nowadays. But during that time, my mum never finished her tertiary education. Actually, she ended at the end of high school. That was actually the end of her education. So she was a cleaner. So she worked in a factory during the day. She was a cleaner for 2 different companies at night time. And so my family, when we moved here, we didn't have a house. We moved from other family members' state house to another family member's state house. And it was 5 years later that we were able to afford a 2-bedroom house over in Blockhouse Bay. So we know what it's like. When families come to my office in Otara, I know what it's like to be in their shoes, to move from place to place, to not have a bed, to not have enough food. And that is one of the reasons why I decided to become a politician, is to serve. Can I acknowledge all of the candidates who have put their names forward to be a candidate? We're all in it to serve our wider community. Our philosophies and our values might be different, but we are all in it to serve our people. I wish you all the very best. Malo pito.
Our next speaker is somebody who swore he wouldn't go into politics again, but just did. Efeso, welcome. Yeah, I'll time you, don't worry. You got 6 minutes. All right.
That's all right, oh yeah. Tēnei te mihi ki a koutou katoa, e ngā mana, e ngā reo, e ngā rangatira, e ngā hauewha, tēnā koutou, mihi mai tātou katoa. It's a real pleasure to be here this evening. I came on the bus because that's what we're about. We're about climate change, our party. And then I got a little bit lost because I got off at the wrong stop and ended up walking all the way from Manurewa. But it's all right, I found my way here, even though I've been in South Auckland. Can I just say, for most of my life, it's really good to see Agnes and Jenny. We were all at university at the same time. Agnes and Jenny were really committed to class, and I was there to just work out what student politics was about. So it's interesting that, hey, it's fun now that we're all here. Similar, I just wanted to tell you a little bit about our journey, and I might comment on the remark that was made about politics and our journey. My mum and dad came to New Zealand from Samoa, and mum is from Satufia, Satupaitea in Savai. That's where I get whanana from, and dad is from Malie. And we didn't grow up Catholic. I now go to St. Joe's in Otahuhu. Apparently, I found the right woman at university. That was the only reason I went to university, was to find my wife. And she was originally from St. Paul's in Massey. And so the only time I was outside of South Auckland was when I went and lived at Fears area, and we would go to St. Malachi's over in Ranui. But now I managed to, I stood for local government. That was my way to bring her back south, and then representing our people in local government for the last 9 years in South Auckland. And I just acknowledge as well my Green colleagues who are here this evening. Firstly, Darlene Tana. You just want to stand, Darlene? This is Darlene Tana. Darlene is standing for us in the Tamaki Makoto seat, so some of you may be on the Māori roll, and Darlene is standing there, and Reverend Peter Sykes is standing for us in Mangere. So we've got the team too. And nice to see my friends here as well. This is really good. I've never met you, Rosemary. That's really cool. I see your face when I go to Mangere all the time, so it's great. Look, when we came to New Zealand, we lived in a state house on Preston Road in Otara for about 20 years. And as I was saying, we grew up, Dad was in Emanuelu. Emanuelu was the Samoan AOG movement. And I think that's probably where I picked up the public speaking stuff, because we were always at church. And my mum was a union delegate. Those days it was the Service Food Workers Union. Now it's E Tū. and Mum was the union delegate, and often she would come home and ask us to interpret how you might say that's not good enough, because my mum was the real get out there and make sure our points were made. And so that's where I think we got the advocacy from and our desire to really influence the world. And Mum and Dad were key, similar to what Jenny was saying, and Agnes, in that education for them was the reason they came from Samoa and the Pacific, so that we could further ourselves and bring real honour to our family. And so I'm the youngest in our family, and that's why I stood for politics. There's good people in the room, like Jenny's a good friend of mine, and Jenny helped us during the mayoral campaign. And some of you made a mistake when you voted, but that's all right. I've forgiven you, all right? And I've had time to walk away from that experience. I know Navtej voted for me, but I've walked away from the experience, and you come back a little bit fresher. You come back with a new perspective, and that's why I've got back into politics. And I've been warmed by the Greens. When we're out there on the doors, one of the things that is really clear, and I love the presentation we had at the beginning, is that we know that we have rising sea levels in the Pacific. It is our people who are going to be the worst affected if we don't do something now. And someone from Caritas said, love in action. Shamu Biel Jacob said, love is taxes. Hey, and it's time to let's focus on the rich, and let's be able to tax the rich so that we can pay for more things. And so I want to encourage you, similar to what the others have said, just vote. Hey, that's what the key message is. We've got to vote. We know that in our area where Jenny and I are, only 2 out of 3 people voted. In local government, only 1 out of 5 people voted. Hey, and that's why you've got to exercise your vote. And so you've got candidates here who are going to be talking about our policies, and that's really good. But I want to encourage you, make sure you vote. Grab your friends. Out there in the moment, they're talking about triple your vote. What they mean is find a friend, find someone at work, go to your shopkeeper, hey, and say to them, go to your mechanic, go to your doctor. Make sure everyone you talk to is ready to vote. Their details are up to date, and they're ready to vote. Because you would have had a much better mayor had we voted, but that's okay. I have forgiven you all, and that's why I go to Mass. So I think my time is just about up, but we'll be talking a little bit more about our policies. But can I just say thank you to Father Peter? I see Father Michael is here, and Deacon Sarnelli. I've been a bit sick. I came back from Dunedin really sick, and Deacon emailed me and the campaign team, and he said, you better make sure a vessel gets there. So next time, Deacon, is it all right if someone picks me up because I got off at the wrong bus stop? Thanks, everyone. Real pleasure to be here tonight, and I'm sure we'll have some really engaging discussion. Thank you. Just stay there.
Are you sure you want to put the direction of the country in the hands of somebody who can't get off at the right bus stop? Now, we have with us tonight a member of Te Pāti Māori who is here to provide, for the first time really, on the political campaign, the kind of conversation and challenge that comes out of Te Pāti Māori. And boy, are we pleased to have a Te Pāti Māori in Aotearoa. Would you like to join us? And I've done all that lead up and I've forgotten your first name. Arabella.
Yeah, Arabella.
Arabella? Yeah. Arabella.
Someone's phone keeps going off. Kia ora e te whānau, ko Arabella tuku ingoa. He uri tēnei no Ngāti Whātua ki Kaipara, Ngāti Pikiao me Te Raroa Huki, and also like all our other respected candidates on the stage. I'm also from Samoa. Firstly, tēnei te mihi ki a koutou, katoa mo te kōrero, as well as to you, Pat, for your warm hospitality and your welcoming of us all tonight. Like everyone else has said, I am also grateful and privileged to be here, and also to be representing Te Pāti Māori on the stage in this debate as well. I think my upbringing has been a little bit different compared to everyone else. But where do I begin? Like everyone, my nana came over to Aotearoa, to the wonderful Papa Toi Toi. I was going to say Pōtato for a second. To the wonderful Papa Toi Toi, where she brought up my lovely mother. And again, Dawn Raid Zero had hit when my nana was bringing my mum up. So the intergenerational trauma that's been passed down through to my generation and through to my siblings has been a little bit of a different, I would have to say, experience to try and navigate as a young Pacifica Māori growing up in Tāmaki Makaurau and primarily South Auckland. Another mention, sorry, aroha mai koutou. I'd also like to thank my boss, who's sitting in the back over there, for giving me the opportunity to be able to express who I am as a tauira, as a young Māori, and also to my work colleagues who have taken the time out of their night to come and tautoko me here today as well. That's all my acknowledgements. Why I got into politics, I will have to be honest, it wasn't actually my pathway. I have 18 months left of my law degree at the best university, AUT, who your husband's our Pro Vice Chancellor. So, yeah, guess my entry into politics would have to be as the tumuaki of our Te Aro Ture, our Māori Law Student Society. So navigating student politics to actually being part of politics as the number 12 list candidate for Te Pāti Māori is two different playing fields. One where you're going up against different universities to another being on the national stage, and the experiences I have learned so far is incredible. Been exposed to a lot of different things, and again, just wanna mihi to everyone for taking the time out of their days to come and hear all of us speak about our policies, our own party's policies, and respect. But also, like Efeso has just encouraged everyone to just go out and vote. South Auckland has the lowest voting rates in any election, so for our whānau out here to go and vote in the current upcoming elections, whether you're on the Tāmaki Makaurau electorate seat, on the Māori roll or on the general roll, your vote counts, and it's important that our future government and our future candidates, or even MPs in each area, is someone that you want to represent you. Yeah, I think that's all I'd have to say in that respect. Yeah. Kia ora koutou.
You know, when I look at this as a Pālangi and see the representatives in your area as all Māori and Pacific, man, oh man, isn't that fantastic? It is just beautiful. It is just beautiful. And I would be proud to be represented by any of these people who have actually the capability and the kind of charisma to make things happen, make things work. Now, what we're going to do now is that all of you will have come to this conversation with an idea in your head about what you're looking for or what you are hoping to see in the candidates. So let's have a space and a place now for some open questioning. Now, before we do that, why don't you do this? Here's a little thing. Why don't you stand up, because you've been sitting down for a little bit, and turn around and talk to somebody close to you and ask the question, what would you think we should be asking these people? And then let's sit back down and we'll have the questions, eh? What do you reckon? You guys are just great. Come on. Everybody sit down and we'll have a conversation. Good. Yeah. Time to sit down. Okay. What we've got is, what I'd like you to do is choose one of the candidates and ask them a question. And we'll give you the microphone to do it. If you just put your hand up, I'll bring the mic over. Yep.
Talofa lava, kia ora koutou katoa toa. Ngā mihi nui ki a koutou, the panelists. My name is Tofi Lau Bernadette Pereira, and I am a resident of Southside. And have been in the community for a very long time. I guess I really want to take note of the comments that Alan made. And that last bit that struck with me was, how do you define, looking at values? And in this world of ours, and particularly as I hear a lot of the bombardment of the different policies that are coming from different political parties, I worry. Because how do you address an issue like the inequalities that exist? So I guess my question goes directly to Agnes Loheni, who is representing National here in this evening. I really want to get an understanding in terms of where you sit as a Pacific person and very aware of the issues that really face our people here in Southside and across the other pockets of Tamaki Makaurau, and that is, what's your understanding of the squeeze, the middle that National talks about? And secondly, the threefold. And secondly, I want to get a further understanding about the tax policy of National. If your leaders are saying they're so confident about their numbers, why are they so hesitant to share the modeling of how they intend to fund your tax and tax cuts? And thirdly, what do you think about those who currently reside in Housing New Zealand spaces, of which your leader went nationally and said that there's all these people that misbehave in houses and they will all have to be removed and bring in people that the government thinks, or should it be National, thinks are more worthier as residents of these houses? Thank you.
Talofa, and thank you, Tofi Lau Bernadette, for your question. Thank you also for the work that you do in the community. It's a very big question, or a big series of questions, so I will try my best to approach the various parts. I think ultimately the underlying premise of the question is around equality, and how do we change that for people? How do we close the gap? It's a term that gets bandied around. And I firmly believe, from my own personal experience, having come from the circumstance that I've come from in that state house with 15 family members, coming to this country with nothing but their clothing, to the situation where I am now, where I am proud to be a mother, have a thriving small business, have acquired a degree. What was it? And I firmly believe that we cannot close the poverty gap unless we start addressing the education gap. That is number one for me. It was the single thing that I can point to that made the change for me and my sisters and my cousins during that period, was unrelenting focus on education from our parents. Yes, it was a strict household. Yes, we would get growled if the report didn't say what it needed to say. There were expectations of us. But I look back and I don't think of it as strict. They cared about us having the opportunities, and they knew that education was the key. Moving on to the tax questions. Sorry, it was the tax breaks, and the other one was around housing. Okay, so I'll just go over some notes on the housing, because I think there has been some confusion around the housing, our housing policy, which was only just released about a week ago. We've had a challenge with having enough houses in the country for a long, long time, and it has been successive governments, and we don't have enough houses, number one. Number two, now we have got house prices that are unattainable for our families. Many of our families, many of your children want to get into their first home, and it's just unattainable. Average home has gone up an average $100,000 in the last 5-6 years. The other issue is rents have gone up, $160 a week now on average in the last 5 years. And so that is putting pressure on housing. So the gist of our housing policy, and there's a spectrum of housing. So we have state housing, or kāinga ora housing, which is the housing that's provided by the state. And then we have social housing, which encompasses state housing, but also housing that's provided by other providers. We call them community housing providers, or CHIPs. And the community housing providers don't just help provide homes, they help provide a lot of other things that our families need. We call them wraparound support, whatever you want to call it. There's the families that have real struggles, challenges, and that's what's also added into those homes. The key part around national housing policy is that we are going to open up community housing providers so that they can also compete with kāinga ora. We actually think that community housing providers provide better local housing solutions, and actually are probably better landlords than kāinga ora because they are in the community. They are often placed in the community, and so we are opening that up so that community housing providers can access funds to then provide that housing, and the number of bedrooms and that's required will be up to those housing providers because they will know the local needs. I'll move on quickly because I think
Okay, you've got half a minute left.
I just want to cover off the tax policies. The squeezed middle that we're talking about is we've got mums and dads that are actually in work, but because of inflation, they aren't able to get ahead. So you've got working parents, children in daycare, they can't get ahead. Inflation's gone up, wages have not kept up. So we are moving the tax break threshold to counter the inflation. That's just so you get, for a family with 2 children, home income of maybe combined up to $150,000, you get $250 a fortnight back from that tax break threshold. Ultimately, we've got to adjust the tax breaks to adjust for the inflation because everyone knows how much food has gone up in this last few years, and that's the threshold that we've changed for that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ka pai. Can Martin show himself, please? Is Martin here? Yeah, Martin. You have questions you'd like to put.
Parish has organised some questions. Thank you. I'll just go. First of all, thank you very much for the opportunity. My gratitude to all the best people that have put their hands up for candidacy. I have to be really honest, I'm quite ignorant in our political space, but I do enjoy living in our society. I think New Zealand is one of the best society there is. I want to echo what was said early on. Going into politics and putting yourself and your family to be in the spotlight is quite difficult, and I want to acknowledge that. I myself can't do that, and I'm really glad for that too. So my question, the first question that we sort of encapsulate the theme that we come across about caring about the common good is the aspect of the cost of living that we are in at the moment. Now, we all know that the cost of living and the inflation is a global phenomenon at the moment. A lot of people would love to blame the current government, but I personally, I don't really think so. There are quite a lot of other things that happens. But the main dilemma that we currently face at the moment because of that is that the cost of living, most of the people now have moved from near vulnerable to very vulnerable. And a lot of our society in the South are very, very vulnerable from the financial aspects. Current measures that are put in place by the Reserve Bank and everybody else is to try to control the labor market so that inflation that can be contained. But the unfortunate part there is that most of the South Auckland people, most of our people lose jobs. They're the first to lose jobs and the first who can't afford the bread. And we see a lot of families moving into a lot of families. That is our reality. And the gist of the question is families are going through hardship and struggling with the cost of living, mortgage rates, market rental properties, petrol prices, just to name a few. And everybody, all the parties and everybody who's putting their hands up are trying to come up with solutions to solve it. So from where we stand is that we have the vulnerable people on one side and money on the other side. What is your response to this?
Test. All right. Cool. Thank you very much for the question. I think there's a number of things that we need to address. The premise of the Greens is people and planet first and foremost. And so when we're looking after people, we're looking after our planet, then we can kind of get some kind of sequence or synchronism into what we do. We have a policy called Ending Poverty Together. What that poverty is, there are 311 families in this country who own about $85 billion in wealth. They are taxed at an average rate of half of what you and I are paying. So that goes to show the gross inequality that happens at the top end, and yet when you and I go and buy our food, pay for our petrol, we pay excise taxes on that and GST and a whole range of other taxes. That means we are squeezed. It's not the middle being squeezed, I tell you this, it is the bottom who are being crushed, not just squeezed, they are being crushed. The only way we're going to do that is ensure that we've got an income guarantee, very similar to a universal basic income, which is the Greens Party policy, which is making sure everybody who is not in work, whether you're in work or not, has a base income of $385 a week. That is everybody across the board. So none of this wasting time when we're begging governments to say, oh, can we just get another $15 or $20 for our benefit? None of that at all. We will lift the support completely to $385 a week. The other thing we need to consider too is the cost of housing. We are not going to put reductionary pressure on housing by opening it up to rich people. That is the fact, and that's why, tofi lau, we haven't seen that evidence. Every modeler, whether you sit to the left or to the right of politics, I was reading it all today, is saying we need to see the modeling of these numbers because it's not going to reduce the cost of housing. If it is our dream to get into a home, then you have to start an apartment, which is where my family started. We're in an apartment because we could afford $550,000. But, you know, there's about 100 of us in our two-bedroom apartment. So that the dream is still far. We've got to do better. And just finally, look, we've got a range of policies. You can check them out. But the other one is we are going to move that there is a 3% cap on rents so that landlords who are making millions, who are making thousands of dollars. Can I just say, the government transfers $2.4 billion a year to who? To landlords. So when you're renting out your property, the government is topping up what the person inside the property is paying. $2.4 billion, we are making a transfer payment. We complain all the time about people on benefits. The greatest benefits is the $2.4 billion going to wealthy landlords. So we've got to correct the imbalance, and that's what's causing the inequality. Thanks.
Can I suggest that, Jenny, Celeste, you have an opportunity to respond to this issue?
We know that we know that times are really tough for our families. Even before COVID-19, things were really, really challenging. We also know that the number one issue, this is actually, we go door knocking and you know, when we knock on doors in Otara or Tahahu, all the doors we've knocked at, cost of living is what they tell us is actually their number one issue. So there are a number of things that the government has already done. Increasing the minimum wage is something that we've done since 2017 when we came in. Minimum wage was $15.75. It is now just over $21. Things like school lunches. We provide just over 1 million school lunches every day to our kids in schools. Things like early childhood education. We actually assist with that. Free public transportation, you know, for under 13-year-olds it's free, and for under 25-year-olds it's 50%. All of these actually add up, and to the point of families in terms of benefits, that has also been increasing since we came into government. Superannuation benefits has also gone up. The amount of money that our students also get has also gone up since 2017. So for us, it's actually all of these added up. And your question was actually, what is it in terms of serving vulnerable people versus money? To the question that Bernadette Pereira also asked in terms of where is the money coming from for the tax cuts for these folks, right? Because a lot of economists have said there's a big fiscal hole of $2.1 billion. Where is that money coming from? They are looking, of course, at selling our properties overseas to overseas people. We actually came into government and we banned that. We actually do not allow overseas foreigners to come in and buy our properties. Why? We don't have enough houses right now. We have a real problem with housing right now. So why is it that we would open that up again, allow other people to come through? That would actually just raise everything up in terms of housing. We're also, of course, building houses. The cost of housing is too much. The cost of rent is too much. But one of the things that government can do and has been doing since 2017 is we've built just over 13,000 public houses or state houses. In addition to that, there are 4,000 transitional houses. And in terms of the community housing providers, they are already there. They're already there right now, and they are already building and providing houses to our people. We just need to build much more. But if you're actually to look at one of the main differences between an incoming government that is likely to be national and ACT versus a government that is to the left, which is Labour, the Greens and Te Pāti Māori, it is actually in how we serve our people. We are focused on serving the majority of people. We in the left are focused on serving our most vulnerable people in society. That is actually the main difference. And so it is important to vote, it is important to enrol, it is important to vote, and please, there is so much at risk. There is so much that will be cut if there is a change in government.
Thank you so much for that. I've got two more questions, so I'll be very, very quick for the second question. The second question is about community. So our people, or most of us, exist as communities. And we're very, as you can see, one of the biggest examples of communities working together was the vaccination program. It was amazing. It was an amazing occurrence that happens, that everybody came together. I suppose at the moment is when the COVID started going out, and now we're in this sort of economic climate, there is a perception of disconnecting partnership between the community organizations and central government. I suppose I would place this to Agnes in your view of the relationship between the central government and communities to respond to, please.
Look, at the heart of national policy, we actually believe in smaller government. And what we mean by smaller government is that we actually think more needs to be devolved into the community housing providers, for example, in housing, and a lot of the social services. So actually under this government, we have seen government has ballooned, government expenditure has ballooned, and yet we haven't received the outcomes in relation to that expenditure. It has actually been very wasteful spending, and we need to pull that back. We need to pull down the size of government and actually support and fund community providers in housing, in social services, who are on the ground in those communities, because one, they are agile and they actually understand the communities that are near them and can offer actually better results and better outcomes. So we are very, very supportive of communities in that sense, that we believe that they can deliver better outcomes for the equivalent, tax dollar. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you.
Sorry. Too many mics are not working. Just to answer your question about disconnect partnership and everything around that, I was part of the kaupapa when COVID first hit, where Māori, we stood up our maraes opened up. We, as much as it was a hard time for everyone, we took away the tikanga where people had to take off their shoes to enter the marae during vaccinations, where whānau were able to leave their shoes on, come inside the marae and get vaccinated. It was a time where Māori are seen to stand up when times are tough. We've seen this during COVID, we've seen this during the Cyclone Gabrielle, the current floodings that have hit South Auckland and even West Auckland, which is why the current Te Pāti Māori campaign for an Aotearoa Hau shows that everyone is loved, everyone is fed, no one's left behind, everyone works together in a te tiriti centric way, in other words. Another thing just to add to that point was, we've done the mahi. Māori and Pacifica have have shown that they can come together and during these times, and it's important that our central governments, our national government, local government actually see that, because we are the grassroots, we are the people that are down on the ground doing the mahi, whereas, I'm sorry to say it, but our MPs are up in Parliament, are down in Parliament, thinking that one solution fits all, when actually in reality, no solution fits one purpose, one problem. It's a different solution, and Māori and Pacifica have shown that time and time again.
Ofeso, would you like to talk about that question? About the role of government in these matters?
Yes. Yeah, look, you go back to COVID, and I was on TV saying very similar things. I think there's a difference between the bureaucracy and how the bureaucracy got it wrong. Because they just thought, cool, let's just give out money, and then they didn't go to the local communities. It was people like Jenny and I who were with South Seas, who were with those kinds of community groups, Vision West. There's lots of groups here, even St. Vinnie de Paul, they're groups doing marvellous work, but it took the bureaucracy ages for them to trust them, because it's like there's these people in Wellington who think, oh, we can't trust these brown organisations because they might steal their $10. So what we've got to do is get the bureaucracy out of the way, and I know I might be sounding like I'm supporting Agnes here, but what I mean by getting the bureaucracy out of the way is we've got to trust the churches, the community organisations, the marae, because they know our communities really well, and that's what part of my problem is that in that thinking, it's the bureaucracy that get in the way. Whether the governments make decisions, but if we've got a bureaucracy that hold it all up, people in Wellington who just look out their windows and say, oh, I wonder what's happening in Papatoetoe this afternoon. They can't see what's happening in Papatoetoe from Wellington. They've got to get close to the community. So I think we can improve our relations with the community, and that means we've got advisory groups forever, and those groups need to be talked to so that we have greater impact and connection as to how governments make decisions and how they are then implemented throughout the community. It is possible, we've just got to get better, and I think the bureaucracy just needs to kind of get out of the way and make sure that we can get money and resource out to the community.
If I could just quickly add, please. So MPs and the government actually have a voice in terms of why it was that we got funding for Pacific for Pacific providers and for Māori for Māori providers. That was actually the work of your local MPs, ensuring that the cabinet papers were written, ensuring that cabinet then agreed to allocate the funding. And what is one of the things that will be at risk if there is a change in government? Since we came into government, there's been over 700 million allocated for Pacific-specific initiatives, including the ones that all of these folks were talking about, vaccination. So when the pandemic started, Pacific people had one of the lowest vaccination rates. We knew that it would take Pacific providers reaching out together with churches to reach out our folks, and actually that was the most effective way. So yes, we are in Wellington, but we also are in the community. Had it not been for our voice advocating for the money, it wouldn't actually flow through to fund the churches and the local providers like South Seas and the whānau and the Māori providers. Malo.
Thank you so much. My last question is I'll pick on the National Party. So this question is for the National Party, and after we hear from them, the other parties will also have the opportunity to respond. You have campaigned to end the use of emergency motels within 2 years. If you become the next government, this means we'll see more people on the streets as before, and more families on the waiting list, adding on to the 25,000 other families. You have also confirmed in your campaign that you do not believe in state housing, but social housing. I think I've got about 3 questions there. Why do you want people out of emergency motels? Don't you think that they have the right to have a roof over their head and a place to keep them warm? And can you confirm the difference between state housing and social housing so that people here understand, please? Thank you.
Thank you. Very, very important question, social housing and housing, obviously, for our communities. I just want to take the opportunity to actually correct, there has been some misrepresentation of our policy, so I'll just outline just some key areas. So with respect, we have not said that we don't believe in state housing of emergency motels by placing those families into social houses. Social houses are better for them than staying in the motels. Look, some motels are better than others, but actually it has not been a good place for many families, particularly with young children. And I'm pleased that you've said that, you know, the 25,000 families that are already on the state housing wait list. When this Labor government came in, there were 5,000 families on the wait list. It has now ballooned out to 25,000. So we actually do have to look at their policies as to a key reason to why that number has blown out. It is not good by any measure. 5,000 is not good. 5,000 is not good. 25,000, that is staggering. And we all need to work together to get those families into homes. So we have, so the question around what was the difference between state and social housing, I sort of touched on this before. Social housing is the general core for housing, term for housing that is owned by, not owned by a tenant or a private landlord. So state housing is in the form of host social housing, which is what we called Housing New Zealand is now Kāinga Ora housing. And I want to highlight that the spending on all housing support has doubled to $4 billion a year. And despite this, the number of people with the highest needs now wait 3 times longer to be placed in a social house. Ultimately, we think there's lots of solutions, but one of those solutions that we've suggested in our policy is that to support community housing providers and allow them to compete with Kāinga Ora for access to capital to build more social houses. And with that competition between Kāinga Ora and the community housing providers, and ultimately I think community housing providers do better support for our families in the community. We will work to see fewer people on the streets and onto that waiting list. And I just want to touch briefly, we have a category to move families from, it's a priority 1 category for social housing register, where we put the families who have been living in cars, and then we still have families living in cars or motels. If they've been more than 3 months in a motel or living in their cars, they will put into be a priority 1 category, first in line to get into a social house. And that does have to happen. So I just wanted to correct that. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much and all the very best.
Is it this?
Sorry, I'm going to stick to the script. It's a bit of a long question. New Zealand has never ever recovered from the national-led government selling off state houses in the 1980s. This is where the shortage of state housing, affordable housing began. New Zealand has never recovered from when the national-led government cut benefits to the most poor and vulnerable in our society, again in the 1980s. Social reform disintegration in our generation began in the 1980s. We as a country have never recovered from this. Please note that warm, affordable housing for all families is a human right. Here is a story that will resonate with many in the room here tonight. It is neither unique nor shocking, and it's quite similar to our candidates up here. I read, when I was a child in the 1970s, I grew up in a state house. It was our family home for life, and this is what we truly believed. There were 4 children in my family, and we moved into a 3-bedroom state house in Mount Roskill. Having moved up from Gisborne, as my father had relocated us because he had a new job in Auckland, living in a cul-de-sac of 10 houses, we were the only Māori family in the street. I was the only Māori child in my year 1 class. I didn't even know I was Māori until my first day at school, but that's another story for another time. There were 3 girls and 1 boy in my family. I shared the largest bedroom with my 2 other sisters. My parents had a bedroom, and my brother had the smallest room. We were a family of 6. That 1/4 acre section was planted with a vegetable garden by my dad, and our neighbors had similar. Move forward to 2019, our home and the homes either side of my family home, both 1/4 acre sections too, had been sold to developers, and 28 2-bedroom apartments have now been built. They look ugly on the outside. Some of the homes have 1 garage, and a couple of the apartments have no garage. But new homes on the inside have huge appeal. New appliances, new carpet, heat pump, etc., etc. There are also no gardens. These apartments are neither practical or affordable to low-income families who incidentally have on average 4 children per family. Move forward to 2023, Catholic Social Services advocates for the homeless and those in desperate need of housing, with whānau living in their cars, sleeping in whānau family garages or overcrowded homes. 12 children and 6 adults in a 3-bedroom house is not uncommon. And in fact, this is our advocacy reality. So is doing it rough on the streets or staying in substandard motels right across Auckland, Whangarei, and Te Tai Tokerau. Why are we building so many 2-bedroom homes when most Māori and Pacific Nation families have more than 1 child per family? Noting that Māori and Pacific Nation statistics make up over 60% of this on low to no incomes, in other words, classified as the poor, the marginalised, and the most disenfranchised. The new social housing complex down the road from where I live in Howick, 75% of the townhouses and apartments in Flatbush are 2 bedrooms, and the complex is either transitional housing or owned to buy. It is pleasing to see young couples buying into this complex, their first home. However, it is not the reality for low-income earners. They cannot even get enough for a deposit, let alone meet the threshold requirement to take out a loan from the banks. Why? Try telling a family of 8 that you will only be here in transitional housing for 3 months while you wait for a more permanent solution, sending your children to a local school, getting them settled into school, only to be ended in 18 months into permanent housing many miles away from their transitional housing. The parents then live with the stigma of being classified transient. Jenny, before we hand the questions over to the rest of the panel, can you answer for us the differences between social housing, public housing, transition housing, and state housing? And sorry, but you only have 3 minutes and counting.
I'll try to answer it in less than 3 minutes because Agnes Lohini has actually stated it before. So state housing and public housing is actually one and the same, and so it's actually the houses that are provided to low to middle income people, and it's mainly owned by the Crown, by the government. And we have currently, I think, 67,099 state or public houses in Aotearoa, New Zealand right now. Transitional houses are the ones that are either owned by the state, by the government, or actually owned by private providers, community housing providers. And families or individuals, when they go to transitional houses, they are supposed to be there only for a short time, temporarily, and then they're supposed to then be transitioned into permanent housing after that. Social housing is a mix of all three. Social housing is mainly community housing providers. Also, there are some transitional housing providers there, and Kāinga Ora is also there, where folks actually are, paying rent, and it's low to middle income New Zealanders.
Thank you. Can Labour, National and Greens now advise us the 1,000 homes per annum in Auckland, will they be permanent housing for our whānau? Yes or no? And will the 1,000 homes be 3, 4 and 5 bedroom homes or larger, with preferably 2 bathrooms per home and not 2 bedroom units?
Ultimately, the number of bedrooms in the houses, we will leave that. Those are operational decisions that we believe are best left in the hands of the community housing providers, because they know the families and the makeup of the families, and they will have the opportunity to plan for that accordingly. We're not going to stipulate what those providers should provide, because they are there, and as I said, we want to support the community housing providers. What was the other part of the question? Sorry, was it?
Will the 1,000 homes per annum in Auckland, will they be permanent housing for our whānau?
Social houses do not have perpetual leases. However, National are committed to upholding any ongoing lease arrangements. And in fact, we believe that when Kāinga Ora, the state provider, has to compete with the community housing providers, they are more likely to provide better support and care for families. And ultimately, what we want is to be able to move more families from social housing into private rentals, or to help them into their first home. That's ultimately what we want for families. The social housing will be there, but we want to work with those families through the community housing providers to get them into their own homes. Thank you.
Joyce, thanks. Our co-leader, Marama Davidson, already made the commitment to the 1,000 homes and public homes when we did something similar in Māngere. So that's the answer to that question, so yes. Just one thing I wanted to touch on is one of the challenges I have around this idea of competition between community housing providers and Kāinga Ora is that when you speak to landlords and you say, we believe in a warrant of fitness for rentals, making sure that the house is warm and dry. If you've got one of those old houses, we want you as the landlord to put in insulation and what do you call those things, heat pumps. And if constantly landlords are saying, oh, well, we'll have to pass on that cost to the renter, that means rents are going to go up. So what's the easy option? Give it back to the Crown, because the Crown is going to charge at a standard rate, so we should give it back. We should have a Ministry of Works that's going to develop all of this. This is part of the problem. When you introduce competition, it's a race to the bottom. It means I'm going to try and do it cheaper than the other person. What do? We get a shortfall of bus drivers because we pay them rubbish. Hey, and that only changed recently. So that's what we've got to be really careful about. The Greens are committed to a warrant of fitness for rentals, making sure that these houses are up to scratch. And up to scratch means they are warm. They are at least 6-star on Green Star measures, and that they are facilitating what our families need. If they need a 2-bedroom house, cool. If they need a 4 or 5 bedroom house, cool as well, but we've got to make sure we get it right. And that's why we believe that kāinga ora is the way to do it. But our challenge to the bureaucracy is get it right. Stop telling our people, if you're kāinga ora and you're acting on behalf of the state, then stop telling our people that you can only have this many people live in a 2-bedroom house, and stop just providing 2-bedroom houses. Build faster. The reason you want the Greens probably sitting next to Labour is we will push them. Labour promised 100,000 houses. We haven't seen any of that. That's why you need the Greens there to push them even harder. Remember when they got voted in 2017? And Twyford went around saying, oh, we've got Kiwi build. Nothing happened. Hey, it was nowhere near the 100,000 houses that they promised. And that's why the Greens are there, to keep them honest and to push them. That's what our role is in this.
Thank you.
A question for Te Whāti Māori. What would your mandate on housing include? 1,000 homes per annum in Auckland, and kei te pai e for Māori only. Will the 1,000 homes be 3, 4 and 5-bedroom homes or larger, with preferable 2 bathrooms per home and not 2-bedroom units? Yes or no?
I think you guys only have the working mic here. Thank you for your partai. I'm going to answer that in 2 separate answers, if that's all pai. Your first, on our mandate for housing, we believe that all whānau have a right to constant, warm, leak-free and secure dry homes. One of our policies through the housing policy that's come out in the last couple of weeks is that we want to build 2,000 homes on our ancestral lands within the next 2 years. Not only will this reset and reorganise whānau Māori living away from their papakainga, from their whenua, having that disconnect, but it will also enable our Māori whānau to be homed, have safe homes. Secondly, we also want to ensure that 50% of all social housing that's built by the Crown must be allocated back to Māori. So not only will that 50% be allocated to Māori, but the other 50% is allocated to Pākehā, Pacifica and other ethnic communities that live within Aotearoa. Not only this, but it will also ensure that we have a fair chance in education, health, and other aspects of society, as everyone knows that we make up some of the highest numbers in, of disproportionate value in these spaces. Your partai on the sizing of each whare, we believe that the whare sizes will be fit for each whānau, so there'll be a mix of 2, 3, 4, 5-bedroom whare, depending on how big your whānau is. So there's not really one size fits all, as we all know that each solution is different to each person. Yeah, I think that answers both your partai, hopefully.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My second question is for the New Zealand First Party, but they're not here. Moving on to my third question. This question is for Jenny and the Labour Party, and after we hear from her, the other parties can also respond. I must acknowledge your response in our submission regarding those who were stranded here in New Zealand because of the pandemic, no flights, and lockdowns between countries. And with the opportunity that was given in granting a one-off residency for those affected, many have now made a huge difference in their lives here in Aotearoa. But seeing on TV1 News 3 weeks ago, migrant workers were stranded in New Zealand with no work, however, had arrived on its accredited employer work visa scheme. Later, it was found that there were more in Auckland who were being exploited by those who promised jobs but were not provided. If you are re-elected to lead New Zealand again for the next 3 years, will you consider another one-off residency to help these migrants who were exploited by the New Zealand accredited employers if jobs are offered to them? And if people who are currently in New Zealand and have job offers from trusted employer, would you consider their applications rather than continuing to rely on accredited employers? Because not all applications for a work visa are granted at Immigration New Zealand.
Thank you for the question. And I believe the visa that you were referring to in the beginning part of your question is the resident visa, which, as a result of being locked down, there were so many people that were stranded here, and I believe that there were over 165,000 folks that were granted their residency here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, the largest ever of its kind. We currently have the lowest unemployment historically in this country, and in terms of assisting our economy and the skilled workers that we need, we always have to look overseas, right? So when we have workers being exploited in this way, it is not actually good. It is not good for the government, it's not good for Aotearoa New Zealand. And so one of the things we've done is we've changed the legislation. We've also brought in what's called the worker exploitation work visa. So for folks who are unfortunately in the situation where they are exploited, we wish that no one is ever exploited, but if there are any that are exploited, they can actually apply for this work visa for exploitation of workers, and most of the times they are actually granted this work visa. There's something else that MSD has just done, actually I think yesterday or today in Māngere, where they actually had a place where they brought employers and they brought these exploited workers and they matched them up. They assisted to help them find jobs. So there are various things that we are doing to address this issue. This is something that should not be happening in our country, because the fact that we need skilled workers is still there. I do actually want to say that Aotearoa New Zealand now, there was a report from the OECD that was just recently released that showed that we are actually one of the top destinations for skilled workers and for trained people. So that's actually good. But in order for us to remain there, we must not exploit our workers, and we are trying to address it.
Thank you. I am now going to open the floor to our other parties if they wish to respond to the question.
It was definitely a very challenging time for a lot of the migrant workers that were in here that got caught in that COVID period, and they couldn't get back to their homes, or perhaps they went to visit family and then they were locked out, and so we had families that were separated. And I know a number of my former MP colleagues, a lot of their issues that were coming to the office were those migrant workers who were just pleading for any help, any support. They were here, they had no income, they were getting no support, and they couldn't leave, and they couldn't there was separation from their families. So it was a very challenging time, and there were immigration experts, there were migrant groups, and the National Party had warned the government for months around the migrant exploitation. It was at its worst it's ever been, and the government chose not to listen. I just want to touch on ultimately the new changes. I don't know that it's going to change anything. There is still too much red tape and bureaucracy, and really was about bringing back proper verifications and checks to keep those vulnerable migrants safe. Thank you.
Yeah, we absolutely support the migrant workers, and we've been on their marches and protests for the last little while. You'll know that our MPs, Te Ano Tuiono and Ricardo Menendez March, have been really supportive. Can I just say, though, that we have a history in New Zealand where we're not good with migrant workers. We brought over heaps of Pacific people in the 50s and 60s, and now we have the lowest level of home ownership amongst the Pacific, 17%. We are not good as a nation of welcoming and embracing migrants, and now we're doing it all over again. This time, though, they happen to be Indian or Filipino, and so we have to rebalance the psyche of this nation if we're going to bring people in, asking them for their help to do jobs and functions that we're asking them to do, then we should take a Māori and Pacific approach and warmly welcome them, look after them, make sure that they've got something to eat, make sure that they're warm and they're stable in homes. And the government sets that framework. The government sets that strategic knowledge for all of us. Can I just say one last thing? I'm going to be talking about this on Radio Samoa tomorrow. But we have been, the Greens have been fighting for an amnesty for overstayers for years. Hey, we've been fighting for that. Te Ano Tuiono's bill was pulled. Hey, and finally we can talk about it. Did you know that there are about 5,000 Samoans who should have residency of New Zealand, but a racist government went to the Privy Court and lost in the Privy Court? So Falele Sa, I think her name is, she got residency. Remember, when New Zealand was under the British Crown, we're allowed, according to the British law, we were allowed to be citizens of New Zealand because we came under their administration. Muldoon's government outlawed that with a racist piece of legislation, the Western Samoa Act 1982. The Greens are going to push both of these parties, or all of these parties, to change that act because it's an act of racism, so that those 5,000 Samoans can get the residency that is due them.
Well, I think that we have come to a crescendo of a finish here in this process, and kia ora.
Kia ora, aroha mai koutou. I just realised that our learned friend Efeso from the Greens Party has just said that we've come to Aotearoa under the British administration. Please correct me if I'm wrong. But in Aotearoa, the British and the Māori signed Te Tiriti o Waitangi and the Treaty of Waitangi in 1840. Yes, might seem like a little bit of a history lesson, but as much as I support migrant workers filling in where we can't exactly fill in the job market, I also believe that while these skilled migrant workers are in these positions, that we're also upskilling our own people to be able to eventually take on these roles, so that as my learned friends to my left have said, we do have the highest rates of unemployment in Aotearoa, and it's if we don't upskill and educate our whānau Māori, our whānau Pacifica, and other whānau who are living here, those unemployment rates are going to continue to rise. So I do believe that education is also key, but it's also key that we're being educated by these skilled workers so that we can transition our whānau into these roles, and eventually our skilled workers can eventually head back to their own whenua if they please. Yep. Ka pai. That's me.
Well, I think it's entirely perfect that the last word is given to Te Pāti Māori.
Yes.
So can I suggest, therefore, that we have the opportunity to close the conversation now? And so, Nelly, I think you have us right at the time now that we are going to do the final closing. Closing remarks. From the floor? From? Lorraine.
I think all this conversation tonight is very good. It's warming us up. But the bottom line at the end of the day, we have the solution. And you know what? Go out and vote.
That's between me and you.
2nd of October.
October.
Nā so lua o ke tupa.
Yeah, second.
Said that, oh, she's going to look after the young people, you know, their little group. And what happened? The Glorious Caritas, there was no kindness whatsoever in New Zealand in that 6 years. To me, I thought there needs to be change. The government needs to come together in unity to work as a bond and to promote the family values, because it doesn't seem to be in law. Well, thank you. Last one, and then I'm closing.
I'd like to ask a couple of questions. I'll come here because I want to listen, but I also wanted to say a couple of things. But I'd like to know, National Party, if you get back into power again, now last time you were in, you sold the airport, you sold the railway, you sold things, and everybody, and then next minute we had homelessness. Are you going to sell the country off? That's my first question. The other question is, now everybody has been talking about things that have happened to humans. I want to know what you are going to do for the animals, because our animals matter as well. It's not just humans that matter, but animals as well. Thank you. I'd like to know your view.
Okay. We've got the National Party first to respond, and then we're closing that. Perhaps I'd like to take that off.
There's a lot there. In short, some things were sold, but we have to look at what is happening to the country today, to the families today, when they go to the supermarkets today, this week, when they put petrol in the car this week. There is not enough money coming into their homes to cover the extra cost of living. And national government has to address that first and foremost. It is the economy. If we cannot grow the economy and address the inflation, the high cost of living that is hurting these families the most, then we can't even look at other solutions for other things. So the first thing is we have to address inflation, we have to bring down the cost of living, and we do have a plan for that. I won't go into all the parts of it here, but it's on our policy. And yes, we do care about the animals. Absolutely.
Thank you.
We don't want to see anyone being cruel to animals. Absolutely, we care for the animals, and we also care for our neighbours as well. Thank you. Thank you for your question.
Yeah.
The Greens have an animal welfare policy.
Kia ora koutou katoa. Kia kaha te wiki o te reo Māori. Ko Lorraine Elliott Aho. Thank you, everybody. I get to do the closing remarks, and I will, and I'll get to it in just one moment. But before I do that, there are just a few people that I would like to thank for making this night possible and for coming along and offering of their time freely. And he's just sitting down. Pat Snedden is one of them. We thank you, Pat. We thank you too, Mina. And Alan, where are you? Please stand up and we'll give them homai te pakapaki. One of the other things that we other people that we need to acknowledge is that we got sponsors for this evening, and these evenings don't sort of pay for themselves. So there are a few people that a few organisations that I'd like to thank personally. Caritas Aotearoa New Zealand, the Justice and Peace Commission of the Auckland Catholic Diocese, who worked together to actually bring this night, make this night possible. There are a couple of other organisations. Radio Samoa, big shout out to you. Kia ora. 531 PI, Walter VLT Music Shop, Pacific Easy, Mialamu Security. Kia ora. Thank you to all those sponsors for helping us make this night successful. The other person that really does need a mention and thanking, and you all know him, is our wonderful Deacon Sanelli, and over there. Kia ora, Deacon. Kia ora, Sanelli. And Peter Garrett at the side there. And also, before you all go, make sure you take one of these, your vote counts, and this is the view from the Catholic Church, and so there are things there around social justice, around the very stuff that we were talking about, that is worthwhile considering. But as Tofila Bernadette Pereira said, you've got to get out and vote. Kia ora. Now, on to our fantastic candidates. Can I just, on behalf of everybody here, thank your supporters for coming with you and making yourself available to answer these questions and to be able to talk to all of us here tonight. Your professionalism and your dignity has been much appreciated by everyone. Ho mai te pakipaki, everybody. One of the key themes in the questions that came out tonight was around housing, affordable housing. You know, for us in the Justice and Peace Commission and in Caritas, it is something dear to our hearts, affordable housing, and providing, you know, as was said in one of the questions there, it is a basic human right to supply every New Zealander with a warm, healthy home. And if we can't get this message across to prospective governments, you know, we are failing as a community. I take heart from one of the comments that was said, I think by you, Agnes, in that with the community housing providers, they are to consult with the community. Well, guess what? It's not been done enough, because there's still plenty of two-bedroom units out there that do not suit Māori and Pacifica families who have more than, you know, 2.5 children in their families. You know, they're usually lovely, big, warm, happy families that need homes. So, you know, by the questions that we had tonight, it was really enlightening to hear from our candidates. And I would like to thank them all, wish them all the very best of luck. You're going to have a very, very busy time. It's already busy now. For myself, I'm through with this election campaigning. I just want to get on with voting, you know, and get it over and done with. But thank you for the time and the courage and for fronting up here today and with your supporters. Kia ora koutou katoa.
I can see that we have gone over time, so I won't say any more, because otherwise the food will be gold. But we have to acknowledge you, especially when this morning when I got up this morning, I checked my emails and I saw Official's campaign manager's email, and he said, "Oh, he just got back from Dunedin, he's not well. Get him here." So, thank you. To Mena, Antonio, and also HA, who were our key note speakers tonight. Lorraine has already mentioned and acknowledged you, but we only got just a small something for you to acknowledge your presence and also your preparations for this night. Thank you. And also Ellen Johnson. Thank you, AJ. And the cards, Peter. Thank you, man. And over here, HA. And also our very young MP. Well done, Arabella. Your family, your finals will be very proud of you. Thank you. The bags. Is there anything inside the bag? Yeah, and thank you, Peter. I wish if I could give more, but my parish priest said enough is enough. And I got nothing else, but I now invite Father Michael. Sorry? Oh, Peter? Yeah. And now I invite Father Michael for our closing prayer and the blessings for them and all of us tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Deacon. I just want to ask a question to Annabella. If I would be an overstayer, would you adopt me here? Kita no te mātu te maiti o te wairua tapu. Mo Maria ianei, o tātou waiata, ki Heavenly Father, we give thanks and praises your name. And as we come to the conclusion of this beautiful evening, of your people come together in sharing, and asking questions, understanding. Lord, we ask for your blessing upon our speakers tonight, and also for our candidates, and especially for each and every one of us, your people who are caring. Lord, we thank you for your love and care, your protection for each and every one of us. We ask you, O Lord, to bless the food we're also about to partake, those who prepare and provide, and all those who organize and prepare this beautiful evening. Bless us, keep and protect us on our way back home as we continue to serve and glorify your name. And this we ask through Christ our Lord. The Lord be with you. May Almighty God bless us, the Father, the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Ja, man weer,